pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome to the Policy Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 4th. To my left, I have President Derringer filling in on the Policy Committee, Trustee Hall. I am Trustee St. John, the Chair of the Policy Committee. We have Deputy Superintendent Dr. Roy Bishop and Legal Counsel Jeremy Motz. Let's do it. So for today, we'll just jump right into it. We've got 3 items on the agenda, and Dr. Bishop, I'll let you take it away with our discussion on our new AI policy.
Absolutely. So I'll come to you today with a second rendition of the AI policy. I know we brought back one from the last meeting. We'll bring back one for this one. This one is really special because we had an opportunity to connect with students and staff. And so via their feedback, we had a chance to make some of the changes around this. While it does still focus on safety and security of students, especially when they're using AI, there are also some very practical things in here as far as what should and should not be done. So when you're going through high-level view, when it talks about like what teachers and educators, how they're using AI, that's going to be focused on page 2 there. And that's what I had a chance to talk with teachers about. And then when I talked to students, I talked to them about, okay, the student use of AI. And it was important for the students, especially the teachers, when they were talking around is like, this is a great policy for us as adults, also for the community to know exactly how we're using AI. But they're really, really engulfed in how do we look at our administrative guidelines. There are certain things in here that they want to know more about. So like I just pointed out for you, when you go to the, let me see, the third page here, B, B1B, where it talks about AI tools for brainstorming, content generation, or drafting, or research assistance, coding, language. Those can only be used when authorized by a teacher. They really want to have it broken down. What does brainstorming mean? What does it mean when we talk about content generation? Because they don't want to get in trouble for using AI. They also have to be able to cite which AI they are utilizing. And they're also going to be using approved AI tools when they're on district network or on district devices. And so that is something that we as a team need to go to EPOC about to make sure we determine that list of what tools can be utilized. It was important for us when we talked about using AI tools on a district network or district device that we were specific about when you're at home, you may want to use other tools, and that's okay. I'll give you a prime example. A student, they kind of taught me a little bit when I was having a conversation with them last week about this app called Suno, I believe. And it's a musical app in which they can utilize to make some things either for their trailers or for their movies or even for like their music. As far as in their music class. And while that might not be approved by us, we're not saying it's not a bad resource that they'll be able to use, but when they are on our district network and district device, there will be some AI tools that will be approved and it will go through the POC process. Students and staff will also have an opportunity to submit certain things that they would like to be evaluated by the EPOC process to make sure that those things are vetted out and are safe for our students. So that they did have some feedback for me, and I incorporated that into the documents that you have here. I don't know if you had anything in here that you saw as far as that kind of like stuck out to you that you want to be able to have further conversation around, but this is also in conjunction with the document that Clark Hill originally provided for us to make sure that this is what other districts were also utilizing who utilize Clark Hill.
I'm glad you added just verbally that that students and teachers can submit possible AI resources for approval from the EPLC, because I think that's very important. If we find something that's really great and we don't know about it yet, we don't want to limit what our students and teachers can be using, but we also want to make sure that they're safe. And like we've talked about, the open source AI is not the best idea, but there's a lot of school-specific AI platforms, and honestly probably ones that you can pay for, but
Sure.
that are restricted and won't be using our students' information or pulling unethically. So I think this is all great. I really appreciate that you talked to students and teachers about it to get that feedback, because my main concern was for student safety, but obviously they want a little more direction, and I feel like that's given when we say things like it has to be expressly authorized by a teacher if you want to use AI on an assignment, and students have to properly attribute credit to the source. So that kind of covers the plagiarism concerns. And, yeah, and then the administrative guidelines will flesh that out a little more, and those will be forthcoming, right?
Correct, yes. After we have a chance to take this policy, of course, from this committee to the Board of Education, and from there, we start working on the administrative guidelines, and we'll also bring this back to this committee, and then it also go back to the board.
Go ahead.
No, I think I was just gonna ask, one of my questions I had written was, how will we come up with that list? Was that something the tech department would generate? But knowing that teachers and students have a voice in that, I think is important, and it's ever evolving, right? Like, there's always new things that are creative and interesting and useful, so I like that we're leaving that kind of open. Just a tiny thing, I had written in page 3B2B, way down in there. I noticed it says, not authorized by their teachers or to cheat on any assignment, test, quiz, and so I think that word cheat maybe is like limiting, so I don't know if, I think even just like being assist on any, they could say, I wasn't cheating on my quiz doing this thing.
Right.
Yeah, I just have one question.
I was just trying to understand this part, so
That's a good point.
cheat to me like defines a specific thing, but I think that you could broaden that maybe. I mean, I know it's not authorized by their teacher. I doubt teachers would authorize those things, but.
B2B.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I appreciate that feedback.
and we can modify that
Just
word.
tweak that
Yeah,
word.
just one
Make it a
word
little
change
bit.
is fine.
Yeah.
Semantics matter.
Well, that's assuming that that's the intent too, which is
You're
not
in the policy
necessarily.
committee, I'll tell you that for sure.
That was-
Okay, I have a couple things that I don't think that they're major things, just general questions. So section A is kind of teacher and educator use, section B being student use.
Yeah.
So when somebody violates the policy in both sections, so first, for teachers who are violating the policy, what does that look like? And for students who are violating the policy, what does that look like?
Great question. So when teachers write the policy, of course, within the building leadership is going to talk to them about the policy as far as what needs to follow, and that's where the administrative guidelines, which really talks about how this has to function in the school, is really going to come into play. So depending on what the violation is, they will handle it directly within the building. If not, they also would kick it to HR. That way HR can help them, and if there's an investigation or anything else that needs to be done, if a teacher violates what's in the policy.
Okay, and then for the student?
For the student, it's going to be the same way. So they're probably going to, depending on if there's situations in high school, of course, they're going to deal with an assistant principal or a middle school principal that will deal with it at the elementary level. They will go through. They also will kind of cross-reference this along with the student code of conduct. There are some things that will interact with the student code of conduct when it comes to harassment, bullying. However, how they're using the AI, it will also translate to other areas in student code of conduct where we have a range of consequences that students will be given for their behavior.
Okay, so you feel confident, as the administrator for the group here, that we're not writing rules that we can't enforce, right?
No.
Like, it definitely all falls into the practicality of trying to actually be consistent with what we're saying and following up.
For sure. And we also wanted to be intentional about writing something that we didn't have to come back to rewrite every week, because we know AI is consistently changing, and the AI tools that we're talking about today, I mean, students are going to tell us that they're not valid tomorrow. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we put in here and that we wrote wasn't something that couldn't be applicable to the student code of conduct. The student code of conduct is still how we're going to discipline students when they do something wrong.
So that was great. Let's start doing.
No, I was to say, because we left the violations, if you say it's section Roman numeral 6, that violations would be subject to academic and or disciplinary consequences, which then would flow down to their teacher contract and those things, HR issues. We're down with the student code of conduct, which talks about violations of plagiarism, cheating, and all that's already addressed, so.
I mean, later we're talking about alignment with the student code of conduct and all that stuff, so just trying to ask the question on the front end.
For sure.
And not on the back end after we've found the problem. Your response, Dr. Bishop, was a great segue. It's come up a couple times, things change very rapidly. The very end of this policy, Roman numeral 7, has an annual review. I think there's a couple things there. Certainly we want to be intentional about how we are going to review this and be proactive as possible as opposed to reactive. There's also an opportunity there for community engagement. We have some folks in our communities who are on the cutting edge on this type of research and certainly have strong opinions that if we can engage, as you did with students and teachers, to get to this point, but on an annual basis, if this is something that we could find an opportunity to engage with the community, that there's strength there, I think. So I don't know that it needs to be right in the policy, but I think it would be useful to communicate that, especially from the board meeting where we're authorizing this, about what that looks like on an annual review basis. Because annual review on AI, there's gonna be a lot. There's a lot of content there, a lot of change from year to year.
I think we also want to start getting to some practices where we're also being proactive and not just coming back and talking about policy or talking about certain situations throughout the district after something has happened. So we're getting into like this cycle with like this continuous improvement where it's like, okay, we know we put this in place in 2026. Let's go back. Is it continuously working for us? Is it a systematic issues? Is it hurting some students because of the way it's written? So we do want to get to a point where we are naming exactly, here's the policy in which we have, here's our review mechanism that we have it, we have EPLC built in, and then that way, when we come to the board, it's some of those annual things in which we do. So we definitely can talk about that at the board meeting, that way people know, like, while this policy is being adopted, potentially, it doesn't mean that it's set in stone, and it can continue to change based upon student input, community input, teacher input.
Right, it has to. It has to grow and evolve, or it's immediately irrelevant and outdated, just like the kids would tell you. Right?
And we didn't, if you would like, you could put in the community involvement. I don't think it's necessary to put like, do community involvement. I think just the normal cadence of the district's communications with the community that it always does through the newsletters and stuff to make them aware. And I know the community is always able to, bring things to the public comment stuff, so I think that could be either this meeting or a regular board meeting. But in addition to the annual review, that's sort of like a regular cadence to it annually, but that last sentence of Roman 7 things can change quickly. You could always do it, if all of a sudden something changes and we need to change the AI policy because there's a big shift, you can always do something, quicker than annually. It's the only time you can look at it. But I think overall the policy, sort of you can go back with the first version that we can, and we've expanded this to now really bring in the different buckets of very specific on administrators or teachers and faculty, students, administrators, instead of just the larger buckets. We got a little bit more granular, but we still kept it at a pretty high level to where the administrative guidelines can have more granular detail that is a little bit easier to work with. And then even going down into different, we talked about different levels, elementary versus middle school versus high school.
That's it for me. I appreciate having something very, collaborative and solid as a starting point in this, where we were almost the Wild West, this time last year. So it's impressive work. Appreciate it.
I want to piggyback off that, President Derringer. It's also important to note that teachers also gave me feedback where they're going to appreciate now that we're having administrative guidelines and setting them up for success in September, because they also kind of felt that, hey, you know what, this is kind of coming at us. We're all kind of trying something a little bit different. Then you're telling us that you can't do this, you can't use ChatGPT, but you can't use Gemini. So I think teachers are also going to appreciate the fact that, we're organized, we have a solid policy, we'll have administrative guidelines. That way they can start planning and preparation now for the 26-27 school year.
I don't feel like it's limiting, at least when I read it, I see it as guidelines and not restrictions, which I think is important because this is something we have to adopt and be welcoming about, but also there's a safety part to it. The one thing about in the administrative, I think, is where it would be most appropriate, and I don't know if we need to put this in here, but as I think to the recent doctor's appointments I've been to and things where they're using AI as an assistive technology to take notes or to write the minutes, do we need to put in there asking permission? Because they always have to ask permission of the patient when they're doing that to say, is it okay if I use this? Is that something, I don't know how we document that.
Yeah, under 4, we have no confidential information, personally identifiable information or education records, student ID numbers, IEP 504 information, or health or discipline data shall be input, unless it's a district-approved AI tool, which we don't have, and the superintendent authorizes it. So I think for those, I think that would cover it, because just your voice is a personally identifiable information. So if somebody's recording in order to take notes.
Just use it later, not in a negative way, but just as an assistance.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that would cover that.
Okay.
Would you agree, Mr.
I
Motz?
think that's the purpose of section 4 and the data where they can't be inputting that. Those note-taking bots that sit up on the Zoom and the Teams and stuff. Using that is sort of to create minutes or whatever from the meeting. I think you can use that as assistive tools, and I think that everybody consents when they jump onto it. So if you're talking about sensitive data, there can be other internal protocols outside of the policy to make sure that people aren't doing that. But that's the big guardrail here is.
As long as that covers
Yeah.
that.
That would be a good thing to look at for the EPLC too, because some of those transcription and note-taking chatbots are open source, which means that it could then share that information out for training purposes or, it's all publicly available, but there are ones that are closed and specifically for schools or for businesses that would not be selling your information. And I think, I agree, a lot of people are using, I've gotten on big organizing meetings where they're taking the notes and like, but where are these notes going? Who is in charge, who actually owns the end product? And so that would be an important thing to read, but I think that's more administrative guidelines.
Okay.
Since it will have to be getting specific about like types of software and types of AI, and that's going to change a lot faster.
Right,
Whereas
and
I
that's
think
not
this
in the
policy, yeah, I think this policy is so general that it will, we'll have to make small updates every year, but I think it will outlive this board, things like a teacher has to expressly authorize that you can use it, you have to properly attribute credit, that should be evergreen. So I think it's a very well written policy, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are we comfortable sending this to the board for full approval?
Yeah,
As is.
is that informal or do we vote on it?
We don't vote in a committee, so we would all agree that that's something to do.
Yeah, I support it, for sure. Comfortable.
Awesome, Greg, whatever.
Thank you.
Okay, so that one is going to the full board. And then we are moving on to policy 6.04 and is it administrative guideline 8.05 or?
No, it's
That's
board
also,
policy.
that's
It's a
also
board
board policy?
policy.
Okay, so board policies 6.04 and 8.05 that discuss contributions, gifts, grants, donations, and bequests. So I know we had spoken at a previous meeting about how exactly to word it so as not to limit the district and what they can be getting, but to limit the political influence that we've been seeing, so if you can.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, so Jeremy was actually here at the last meeting, and based upon the context in which he heard, he brought things back for us, I'm gonna have him explain it.
Yeah, so we talked about, there were sort of two things, we focused last meeting on grants and what those were, and then we also noted that we did have the word grant, and that was that's Article 6, and Policy 6.04, and then under Article 8, Policy 8.05, the word grant was used, and grants and gifts are different things. Grants are often like the teachers or administrators go for that support an education, get some new equipment or what have you, and they're usually small mini grants and stuff. So pulling that word grants out of Policy 8.05 and focusing that just on gifts, donations, and those things that somebody might just want to voluntarily give to the district, and so splitting that. So we really made that split. So then 6.04 stayed the same. Now just focusing on 8.05, really based upon the comments that came back from last policy committee meeting about two things. One is the not having the superintendent being making it clear that the board still is approving the gift, so it's not on the superintendent, and so there was already in the grants one, so we clarified that there's certain information that the superintendent or their designee would need to find, maybe the appropriateness of the use of the gift, if there are any restrictions on it, and other things of that nature that would be need for the board to have to make its determination whether to accept the gift or not. So that's all information, so there would be an informed decision if this is if there's weird restrictions that would compromise the district, whether it might be a great donation or a gift, the board may say, well, we might not be able to utilize that to build the building that you want to build because of all the other expenses that would go along with it, for example. So that was the thing. So we clarified that the superintendent would gather all of that information and then make sure that's sort of presented to the board, so the board is made aware of it, to the board to make the final decision if it's approved or not approved. So that was the first thing that we clarified. The second one was along with, getting into, the political influence, if that is certain. So we did add a language that, this is proposed to take a look at about limiting grants and gifts that would be from political influence organizations, which is a a term that's out there that cover a lot of different categories, not just one particular, any type of political, or so, you know, right now it's limited in as an absolute, or it's written as an absolute, is well, you will not. So, but you can always adjust that, but that's just for, because of the comments, we made the changes for you guys to look at, and that's what's in front of you right now. Those were really the two main things that were made in 8.05.
So are there any questions to start off?
In the 6.04, it says that the superintendent is responsible for efficient and effective administration. Would that also be the job of the CFO, since it's monetary? Or would it be the CFO then would delegate? Does it need to say in there that they're delegating that?
Well, superintendent, we use that a lot as the sort of the head, you know, official. A lot of different reasons. One is it's just the consistency, but then under the policy in a different section, the superintendent can delegate that to somebody else. So yeah, superintendent ultimately responsible, yes, it would probably be delegated to CFO, or it might even be a different department head, maybe it's for the curriculum or something, depending on, you know, what's actually being the grant is for. It could be a curriculum grant, and maybe that assistant superintendent would be responsible for overseeing that.
That's how it happens now, like depending on the grant and what nature it is. If it's curriculum, then I will go to Dr. Delgado with that, say, hey, here's the grant for this, please look into this. Connect with our CFO as far as the budget line item it will go into. So we do connect with different people depending on what type of grant it is that we're trying to go after.
Okay,
The
and I knew
superintendent-
that, it set it up at the top, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It had those, you know, it said more beyond the superintendent, so I didn't know if that needed to be included down there or not, but.
I think we're saying the superintendent is ultimately responsible for all of that.
Okay,
You know, if, just like with anything in the district, if something goes wrong, it's the superintendent's fault. If something goes great, the superintendent gets to take credit. Like, they are the buck stops with them. So, they're responsible for that administration, but they will obviously delegate to the appropriate department head.
So the biggest change right now is that we clarified that the board is the authorizing body in both cases. Previously, it was for grants and the superintendent was authorizing the gifts,
Yep.
requests, and donations. That's board authorizes in both cases now, for
So
sure.
that was the to align those so they're both the same, but also just for clarity of the, you know,
Right, we took the
who's
word grants out
ultimately,
of the second
yeah,
one to make
who's
sure that.
ultimately responsible for, you know, approving and accepting that gift or grant.
I appreciate that you put the language at the end of 8.05, that, hey, if you're looking for grants, that's 6.04.
Yep.
I think that's wise. I wonder if there's a similar need in 604 to reference 805. If you're looking for gifts, requests, and donations, you should probably go to 805, right? I think it's
That's a good
equally
idea.
valuable in the other direction
Uh-huh.
as a small point.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the reason we had discussed that, that the board is the ultimate authority to approve this is so that the superintendent doesn't get stuck in these situations of, am I allowed to accept this? If there's any question, the board is ultimately responsible for deciding what's appropriate. And then we're putting in there that we won't be accepting any donations from political influence organizations or entities, just so it doesn't become an argument that keeps getting, becoming a long part of our agenda of whether or not there's just no political influence. And that means that all nonprofit, like all 501c3s are never a political influence organization. So they're all in the clear. Our PTOs, the state government, the federal government for grants are all going to be fine, but I'm sure there will be some debate in the future about what constitutes a political influence organization, but that's a debate the board can have instead of putting the superintendent in the middle of political conflicts.
Yeah, so in terms of that content, so we added the statement, the board will not accept gifts, bequests, or donations, or in the previous section, grants from any political influence organization. I think that is simple and clear. I can appreciate that. In the gifts section, in 805, there's a preceding sentence that we added. School board members and candidates must abide by Michigan Campaign Finance Act with respect to disclosures of contributions and expenditures, among any other applicable legal requirements. I I agree with that. I wonder why it was added here in terms of context.
Generally, that's, the Michigan Campaign Finance, when you get into donations, for the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, donating to the district as a sort of a vehicle to do advertising or, for the district, or for the benefit of a political candidate, there are certain rules, so we wanted to make sure, just aware that the board members, they still have obligations under the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. The district does as well if you're going after other campaigns, but the board members do. And it's more of just making sure that they're aware that they have to abide by those rules, and you can't use a donation as a way to essentially violate the Campaign Finance Act, which is already written in the Campaign Finance Act. So our policies don't typically like to recite the law, but it is because it's getting into that area, we felt it was right just to say, hey, the law already says you can't do that. This is our policies also aligning with.
Reminder, you can't.
You can't use donations to violate a law, which is pretty straightforward already.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary to have the reminder in the policy, but since our legal counsel put it in there, I was like, sure, can't hurt.
Like I said, I understand it, and then as a clarifying principle where, that is, at least some gray area in terms of our conversation at the last meeting, for sure. It's fine to be more clear there. I was just wondering if there was something specific that prompted that. Okay. Those are my only questions that I see here on the surface.
Okay, so are we comfortable with sending this to the full board as is? With
A couple, there's that one reference in
Yeah.
6.04, we can make that small tweak to reference over to 8.05.
to see also 8.05, and I think that was the
Yeah,
only
that
discussion.
was the only.
Everybody comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable.
Okay. That will be the plan. Making good time. And then finally, we are going to be discussing code of conduct revisions, as Dr. Bishop stated at a previous meeting. We're looking at the code of conduct for all the inconsistencies that might exist, and this is one example, but we will not be sending this to the full board right now because there are so many, a lot of nitpicky stuff in the code of conduct that needs to be resolved. That's all going to come before the full board, before the next school year. We will be approving the entire code of conduct. So the policy committee is gonna go over each one individually, but then the full board will just review the entire code of conduct and approve it all at once.
Yeah, and I'm also asking for a little bit of permission as well, because even though we're not gonna be voting on this until the beginning of the school year, we vote on our board policies every year, I would like to bring these back. That way we are publicly talking about some of the changes and some of the nuances of our code of conduct. So within this one, we really pretty much while within our bylaws, it doesn't talk about us having a closed campus. We wanted to make sure that even though our campus was open, that we put some measures in place as far as some revisions within the student code of conduct. And so you'll see the proposed revision there, and then there's also a new code of conduct provision just for high school. And within those, some of the biggest changes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, we're gonna talk about a parent permission opt-in for high school open lunch. Just to be clear, elementary and middle school is not open lunch, you must stay there, okay? But for high school, for someone to be able to leave campus, they're gonna opt in through our K-12 registration every year. That way, we can say, okay, they can go. The next part goes to that, how do we monitor that? So as a safety committee, we're looking into several things that we can put even in our secure vestibules where students can use their ID badges to make sure they are logging in and out. And we're also looking to have more human capital at the doors. And as of right now, there's one door in and one door out that we're having students. So, I know we're having conversations about how does it look, what's some of the logistics, but we're really trying to work through that and be safer. So we're gonna need like a little bit of time to kind of figure that piece out. But we also bring it back to the board here, some of the other safety measures that we're doing while still remaining open campus and just doing it a little bit safer. So that way when our students leave, we know exactly that they're not in the building, that they're coming back. We also reserve the right, for instance, if a student is coming back to school and they've been tardy, or they're coming back and they're missing an hour, we reserve the right to revoke their privileges as far as leaving campus, because they may have to stay, because we do have food at the building for them to get, even though they may not want that sometimes.
Yeah, so it will be making it more of a privilege than what it's now seen as, which is a right, even though it's always been a privilege, but the students right now seem to think that they have the right to, the high school students have the right to leave, and we need to make sure that that's something that parents have agreed to. I think that part is really important because right now we have an opt-out policy, not an opt-in policy, so parents might not fully realize that their students are leaving campus for lunch. And then as Dr. Bishop said, finding another way, maybe scanners where they can scan a badge in and out, so that we know what students are on campus at any given time. So if there's a fire drill, you know how many you're accounting for, you know, just basic stuff like that to improve the safety.
And just to be clear one more time, the new code of conduct provision does not apply to elementary, middle. It's only for high
They don't get to
school.
leave.
Yeah, no, I've been filling a couple of questions from parents like, hey, why are we open campus for middle school, elementary? We are not. We are not opening campus up for middle school, elementary.
So like, but the current code of conduct does have a closed campus violation, so we're still leaving that because that says that, you know, basically a student can't leave any building between, you know, the starting bell and the closing bell unless authorized by administration. So that's sort of where the current code of conduct, that authorized administration, was where the high school lunch can be open because they're authorizing them. Here, this is then adding a provision, so that's still staying. And then there's adding just the high school that would then go to the opt-in, opt-out mechanism.
So they would have to choose one, they wouldn't just be choosing to opt in to open lunch. Down here it's referenced as opting out, so parents would have to say one way or the other.
Well, it says if they leave campus for lunch and they do not have a signed and submitted open lunch opt-in form, then that's a violation. So I think if the parents don't fill it out, then they're not leaving. And I think that helps with because the current situation is opt-out only. Some
Right.
parents might not have looked at that
Okay.
with all the forms that you get at the beginning of high school and not realize that their student has been leaving campus every day. And they might not be comfortable with that, especially I don't know if the policy is always applied to our students in categorical classrooms or with IEPs, but I'm sure a lot of those parents would not be comfortable with their student leaving unattended.
And this is sort of like the first, you know, sort of like we started with AI, we had the initial draft. This is sort of like what this came to, again, like Dr. Bishop said, is this is something that's going to be a change. So this is something to get out there, so the community is now, it's sort of in front of them and it's March. It's not going to really implement until September, but the communication piece, people now, so if the tools for policing kids leaving and coming back to school modify, you know, we can always tweak this a little bit. This is sort of the first go based upon, you know, the grander ideas, and as it gets, you know, more refined, we can always switch this up. And I think this is a good starting point for that opt-in, opt-out mechanism.
That could be administrative guidelines, right? Once you develop a system for how to check in and out during lunch, that could be an administrative guideline,
Yeah.
that wouldn't necessarily have to come back to policy.
Yeah, that's true.
Because this
I would like the group to know exactly what we do and how we operate. That way when you're in the community, you can say, hey, here's what it looks like, for sure.
I didn't realize we had that opt-out, which is why I had that question, because I haven't filled it out for high school, so. So now I know that actually exists, that makes sense here. And like, there was talk at one point of like, letting seniors do it as a, you know, honor thing, or not allowing ninth graders and phasing it in, and I'm glad we're not trying to do that, because I think that it's either yes or no. at this
I
point.
would have been happy to close campus for lunch. I think it's very unsafe with new drivers going in and out and
I
not
understand,
knowing.
yeah.
So, you know, I think we've talked about that offline, that's my opinion, but it was clear that that's not what the community wants, and the majority of the board probably would not want it either, so I'm fine with this to make it a little bit safer.
Yeah, my thought on the whole conversation when it emerged was that, I mean, it's a pretty special privilege that kids in our community get, but in order to keep that privilege, the community adults, including the district administration and the board, we had work to do. And we needed to make it safer and make sure we're protecting kids. And also, the reentry to the classroom after getting to go crazy, you know. I heard from a teacher and their opinion on how this impacts, you know, the return to school, and as orderly a reentry to the building certainly would be useful also. I'm sure attendance has clear patterns to the classes that are right after lunchtime because of this policy. So it's on everybody to kind of earn those privileges and keep those privileges by acting the right way, both you know, adults and kids. So,
That would be something to add to the administrative guidelines too, is are teachers individually allowed to revoke those privileges if students are disruptive, either coming late to their class after lunch, or as I've heard, coming in with a full pizza and sharing it with the whole class, and it's a science
That
lab.
would be me saying that has happened, because when I did teach that, I mean, like, my reaction to this as a teacher was like, that is the worst thing, right? Like, and I'm saying that in public because I've experienced it. They do. They go to Little Caesars, they bring the whole pizza, they used to bring the whole pizza and like hand them out in the hallway. Like, that's not how we wanted things to be. And then to calm that down is really difficult. Like, no, you can't bring the Taco Bell in because all room's gonna smell. So that was, you know, the one side of it. But then I wear my parent hat, and my daughter wants to come home at lunch at, you know, walked a couple blocks. Yeah, so I had conflicting things about this, and I think it's a little bit stricter now in terms of them coming and going, and if there are policies, then absolutely, I think it is a privilege that they have gotten used to and the community has gotten used to, and so making it safer is good, and I think the teachers that I talked to, because I did go back and ask a lot of people that I know, and they're like, no, it's not how you remember it. So I'm glad, because it was very disruptive.
Well, and that's the question is, could one teacher revoke those privileges for the student if it was disruptive, or would the principal only have the authority to revoke the privileges? That would be something to discuss. So that's not important to me either way. But
I
as
think
a
you could
teacher,
always
I'd
use
rather
this
be-
as a disciplinary,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like, it's a privilege, so it's like something that you could take away if a kid did something wrong at school instead of being suspended. You know, they could lose, this would be something you could take away, this privilege, say, well, that's part of your discipline is you lose this. This isn't like a right, this would be a privilege that, from a constitutional standpoint, you could take this away. So I think you could do that. I know you mentioned AGs, like, the board doesn't have a board policy on open or closed lunch, and you don't have it now. I don't think you need to have one. This has always been dealt with, this traditionally in the code of conduct. So we could add some more language about, you know, what disciplinary goes, but I think probably the principal would be the one that would enforce. If there's a disciplinary matter that a teacher's like, well, I don't want Johnny going
Right.
to open, you know, open lunch because he's been disrupted the last day, I think that would be something, a conversation with the principal or assistant principal, wherever it would go, to say, that might levy discipline.
And I just want to be clear about your question. So like the teacher will connect with the assistant principal or principal. They would handle the discipline. The teachers, we want them to be able to teach.
Yeah.
So like I just
We
want
don't
to be clear. I just want to be clear, like if the teacher sees an issue or problem, just like within attendance, within tardies, they then let administration know. Administration has their guidelines of how to be able to implement some of those things. So we won't necessarily want the teacher to do that. We'll have the administration do that.
Right, and last bit, just as a reminder, this was brought forward, you know, by Dr. Tuttle from the building principals at the two high schools, right? They took this to Dr. Tuttle brought it to us to review for this alignment. We took action on a kind of an interim basis for the remainder of this school year, just so we could provide that clarity to our administration. And then this is the work, the follow-up work of what are we actually going to revise going into next year. So just, you know, the full context that this, you know, we're coming down the home stretch on trying to solve this problem that was brought forward by the administration here.
And just also to be clear, they also have been working with me on what will potentially be in the secure vestibules. They brought that idea forward of how to make it safer as well. So I just want to be clear, like everyone has been on the same page connecting about this since this is brought to our attention.
Right, great.
And we're not drastically changing anything, we're honestly just implementing more paperwork. But
And we're making it a little bit safer, right?
yeah,
Like,
if that means we
we're gonna
know
have
where
to-
the students are, I think that's
Yeah,
important.
and trust me, it's not going to be like a perfect system. We're going to have to, you know, the first year go through it and get feedback on some of those things, but we feel like it would be better than what it was.
Any other questions? So to reiterate, that is not going to the full board yet, the full student code of conduct after we pick it apart and make sure it aligns with everything that we're actually doing will come before the full board, July, August, do you think? All right, so now we are at public comments. You would have 3 minutes and just stand up and state your name and go ahead. Ready? Go ahead.
Kelly Larson, Grosse Pointe City. I just wanted to thank you for including updates to the policy regarding finances, accepting the grants, and adding specifics to accepting gifts as well. Particularly the sentence about not accepting any grants from political influence organizations. At the last meeting, President Derringer mentioned that he cannot personally resolve the impropriety of accepting funds from an organization that was created for political influence. And I agree with that completely. But I'm wondering if, and I don't know if this needs to go into a policy or not, but also for a political influence organization using district resources. For example, emailing, using social media to promote their activities or events. Because I think it would be along those same lines. And again, I don't know if it would need to be a policy or not, but I would just feel it was inappropriate as well. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would like to speak. Kevin Nugent, Pointers for Academic Excellence. Let's start with some background information. A district teacher recognized a need, did the research, and presented the swim grant to 2 philanthropic organizations in the district, only to be denied. Communications Director Rebecca Fannin, recognizing the grant was in line with what I had suggested to Dr. Bishop, offered it to PFAE. Former President Worden and Dr. Tuttle approved it to be announced through district channels, and excitement grew around the news. From there, as is commonplace with this board, outside interference trumped administrative actions. The board then created suspicion around our motives and altered the grant's path, sending it to the policy committee with vague language about all kinds of concerns. Concerns that were not shared by your attorney. Your own counsel stated that there is no state or federal law that prevents you from accepting a student-focused donation from an entity like ours for this purpose. The issue then became, how can the district create legal language to prevent the district from accepting the grant? Then the spin began from Trustee St. John and majority board supporters. To set the record straight after the outside interference stalled the grant, we emailed the board stating the following. In light of the decision to leave us off the agenda and delay our grant, we are withdrawing the specific grant approval. We will redirect these funds to partners who are ready to move forward in serving kids now. If at some point the board chooses to apply its policy consistently and is interested in a good faith partnership with PFAE, on behalf of students, we would be glad to revisit. We didn't name it at the time, but we purchased $8,000 in instruments for the band and orchestra, who met our parameters of a willing partner, serving kids now, and met the need. So when Trustee St. John said online, we received notice that the PFAE had pulled the grant once we started asking questions, like who would be driving the students, who is responsible for hiring the swim instructors, why didn't any local nonprofits such as STEAM accept this grant? That was a lie. The grant had already been stalled and left off the agenda. To suggest we ran away from questions is unsupported by any record. You want to deny PFAE because of its political advocacy, yet you routinely drive traffic from the board table to your preferred political ally, the Alliance, whose web page's banner has a large donation button you cannot miss. The Alliance is a 501c4, a common apparatus for dark money contributions, which does not have to disclose its donors and can engage in substantial lobbying and election-related activity, including supporting all of your campaigns, not coincidentally. Now you have written into policy that the board alone will decide whether to accept any grants and will not accept any gifts, requests, or donations from any so-called political influence organization or entity. Curious why you never define that term. To clarify, you deny us from funding programs for students with the most need, while you personally continue to promote and accept political support from a 501c4. That is called viewpoint exclusion, a specific legal term you should ask your attorney about before he leads to that. Your open allegiances and patterns of viewpoint exclusion have fostered divisiveness into community.
Mr. Nugent, that's your time. Thank
Okay.
you. Anyone else?
We finished my statement.
Go ahead, Mrs. Felder.
We're just talking.
Right there.
Lakeitria Felder, Policy Director. Lakeitria Felder, Policy Director of Alliance for Grosse Pointe Public Schools. This has been a recurring statement by PFAE. At no point has Alliance ever denigrated PFAE in the work that they've been doing within the district. They are formed in the fashion that they are formed in as a political action committee. Alliance for Grosse Pointe Public Schools is a 501c4 nonprofit social welfare organization. We have complied with all rules and regulations by the state of Michigan. At no point do we ever create a narrative where we are in opposition to PFAE or the work that they're doing. Yet again, in a public comment, as it has been done at various committee meetings, various board meetings, there's this tension that they try to create, this competition that they try to create that is unnecessary. PFAE can do what they want. You chose how to organize. Alliance chose how to organize differently. We have done nothing improper, nothing illegal. We are not a political action committee, period. So if PFAE wants to stand on their own merit, PFAE should do that. This is not about Alliance. This is not about how we operate. Everything is done legally and properly. And I really hope that the narrative can end so that we can focus on important issues. Having these scripted moments and statements benefits no one. There's enough space in this community for multiple organizations with different goals and different approaches. I wish the narrative would end. We do not sit in conflict with PFAE, but time and time again, we are maligned and denigrated for us trying to use our voice in the way that we deem appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Engel?
Glenn, will finishing PFAE's statement. Referring to the Alliance, your open allegiances and pattern of viewpoint exclusion have fostered divisiveness in our community. At the last board meeting, the Alliance's own communications director, Rosie Knapp, shouted down someone exercising their First Amendment rights at the podium, all while President Derringer, like President Borden before him, abandoned his responsibility to protect decorum. That's the group you publicly point families to as the trusted source for information. If you now add broad language to block PFAE after your own lawyer said there was no basis, you are writing a policy to exclude the most transparent organization in this conversation precisely because you do not like our criticism of the dysfunction of this board. If you are going to deny students a fully vetted, lawful grant for swim safety, then, on the record, you should also start recording your own meetings and stop directing traffic to the Alliance as a source for information. The message you are sending is obvious. Some political advocacy groups are welcome, while others are excluded based solely on their viewpoint. Despite your best efforts, PFAE will continue to put our money and our efforts behind students, families, and programs in our community. Thank you.
And that is all the members of the public have had their chance to comment, so committee member comments. President Derringer?
Yeah, a few. There's a false equivalence comparing PFAE and the Alliance. There's a false equivalence there. There are different definitions. To me, both are political influence organizations. I would not accept money from either organization. It is improper to accept money as a public district from political influence organizations. The district should not accept money from the Alliance. The district should not accept money from PFAE. The $8,000 for music instruments, I don't know where that went. I don't know how it went. I don't know whose pocket it was in. I don't know where those instruments are. I don't know how we're accountable for that. That's the problem. That's the problem. It creates gray area. It creates gray area. It creates the perception of conflict. There is no state law or federal law that makes it illegal to do that. That's why the policy was necessary. Please refer back to the last policy committee meeting and listen to what Attorney Motz said. There's gray area there. The district leadership, the board, has to make a decision about where that line is. I stated my personal preference to the committee here, and when it comes to the full board, I will say the same thing. It is improper for a public school district to take funds from a political influence organization. The branding committee issues are really, really troublesome. Really, really troublesome. $28,000, I don't know where that ever went into the account of the district. I cannot account for that. No CFO can account for that. Who controls the money now? I don't know, but I know Rebecca Fannin controls the scope and authorizes the payment. That's the way that it should be. The 2024 funds, I don't know who started with it, I don't know who ended with it. We will review the PFAE very public documents on how they spend their money and try to figure out how that's categorized, and we'll figure out when it was amended. But to this point, my statement stays the same. It is improper for a public school district to take money from a political influence organization. I might not have the broad acceptance of the other board members, but my feeling is never going to change on that. It is improper. In terms of one person's actions at the last meeting and getting outside of the protocol of public comment, the police officer in the back of the auditorium certainly stepped in at the right time. It's awfully hard from the stage to control public comment without trying to infringe on what somebody is saying. I was choosing to let that particular speaker speak his mind despite my discomfort with what he was saying and how he was saying it. The person that shouted him down, equally uncomfortable for me, right? However, the speaker at the podium had the floor. The speaker that was not at the podium did not have the floor. It was pretty clear who was out of line. The police officer had already gotten out of his seat and was trying to calm the situation down, and he did. I take that very seriously. I do not appreciate anybody implying that I am not doing the best that I can to monitor and enforce the decorum of the meeting. That is my role, and I'm doing that to the best of my ability. Nobody's perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, but I do not appreciate personal criticism that I am not upholding the duties of my office. Thank you.
Trustee
I just want to thank Dr. Bishop for the work that was done on the AI policy, and reaching out multiple times and meeting with students and teachers is really how things should come about, and I think that it's a good policy, and I look forward to bringing that to the board. I know there's a lot of contention and a lot of opinions throughout our community about the grants, gifts, bequests, and donations policy. I think we have some great organizations within our community that are very active to are represented here tonight, and I think there are also other organizations that bring forth opportunities for our students, and I think that those are a more appropriate place to fund things within our district. The STEAM Foundation and the Grosse Pointe Foundation for Public Education are two well-established groups within our community that bring forward money and do amazing things and opportunities for our students and teachers to apply to get money from those places. I think are an appropriate way to fund the things that are being funded. So I support this. I think that this is a step in the right direction, and I also look forward to bringing that forward to the board. And I think at first the policy with, I mentioned this also, but open lunch versus closed lunch, I was like, no way. I had separate conversations and I think it was the worst thing, but I understand why we have it, and I think that this makes it acceptable and also safe. So, thank you.
Mr. Motz, did you have anything that you wanted to add? You want to, just giving you an opportunity. Dr. Bishop?
Nope.
I just want to thank the board here for the opportunity for connecting with kids. You know, and I had a chance to connect with them on the AI policy multiple times and with staff. It really reassured for me, like, we're going about it the right way as far as making sure we're making changes that agree not only with what our students are saying, but also that agree with how their education environment should be safe. And we're making it safer. So like that was great. I actually, went to Starbucks, and the young lady was talking to me about our meeting that we had with AI, saying, hey, when you come back the next time, we got some things we want to talk about, which I was actually fueled by. I'm like, that's great. You got some things for me. So the next time I'll be meeting with students, they did not want me to say their names, so I'm not going to embarrass them today. But I appreciate them for their honesty, for their open voice, for continuing the conversation. And we're going to be doing that more because we are here to serve, and especially to serve students, and that is our bread and butter. So thank you.
Right. Yes, thank you, Dr. Bishop, for meeting with the students and teachers about this AI policy to shape it, and thank you to the students and teachers who participated in those discussions, because it is a sticky subject, and as you can see, we've already gone through multiple revisions, and I'm sure we'll have more revisions to come on the AI policy, and it's all hands on deck to try to figure out what to do with the new technology, so I appreciate everybody's contributions on that. To address the issues about external contributions, I'm first concerned to hear that 2 nonprofits denied this grant that has become such an issue. If nonprofits are refusing to fund it, that leads me to further questions about why. There's not viewpoint exclusion. I do want to be very clear that 501c4s will also be excluded from grants, requests, donations, not that any other organization that is established for political influence has tried to give us a lot of money, but they would also be included in this policy as a political influence organization, just because the way 501c4s are set up, they can have political activity, it just can't be their main purpose, and we talked with legal counsel about that as far as, did we want to say just political action committees, or did we want to say all political influence organizations? So we said as Trustee Derringer said at a previous meeting, I think, if even 1% of their activity is political, we don't want them to be funding programs at our schools. I don't think it's appropriate to say that we should be partnering with a political action committee or a public school district. We shouldn't be partnering with any political party or organization. That's not what we're about. This money can all be funneled through nonprofits if it's truly something that you want to fund. And in order to make this policy, I did ask board members and administrators in other districts, because I could not find any policies that were comparable in other districts that specifically exclude political organizations, and I asked why is that, and mostly I got laughed at, because they said, well, why would a political organization try to give us money for anything? We're a public school. And I said, well, just imagine that a political party came and said that they wanted to give you a grant. And they said, well, we would just say no. The superintendent has the authority to say no to anything, so I guess we'd just say that. We don't need our own policy. So that's why we have this unique policy, because we are in a unique situation, and this community has a lot of money, and I would like them to funnel it through nonprofits if it's going to come to the school district. And that way, again, to President Derringer's point, we can keep track of where it's going, what it's being used for, and have appropriate grant agreements with the organizations, because that's something that's been an issue, is if nobody's signing what the pay schedule is like, what the scope of work is like, if it's just a gentleman's agreement, then we see it coming up as a political expenditure in campaign finance, and that's not appropriate for any school board activity. To summarize, we will be sending the new AI policy to the full board for approval. We will be sending board policies 6.04 and 8.05 about external contributions to the full board for approval at the next meeting. And then the discussion about open and closed campus and the code of conduct will be reviewed for the 2026-2027 school year. So it is not going forward at this time, they will all go forward together. And with that, we are adjourned. 2 minutes to spare.
6:04, you will have separate agenda items.
You guys never